Hey guys, this is Lisa from My Copper Life. Today we're going to work on this star tree topper. You can either do it with lights or without lights, so it's your choice. The materials we need are 16 gauge wire, 24 gauge wire, chain nose pliers, round nose pliers, flush cutters, flat nose pliers, a bench block, copper wire fairy lights, a chasing hammer, a ring mandrel, and a metric ruler. To get started, you will need some 16 gauge copper wire. You can use whatever color you'd like, but keep in mind that the fairy lights are copper. I started out with measuring about 65 inches of this copper wire. That seems like a lot, but that's what we need for this. Then I take my wire and I'm going to measure one of the ends at 19 inches. So as you can see there, I took the length of the metric ruler and then added another inch, which totals to 19 inches. And now I'm going to mark with my Sharpie that 19-inch spot. This is where we're going to make our first bend. That 19 inches is what's going to make the bottom of the tree topper, the part that actually sits on the top of the tree. Here I've created my own star pattern by using quite a bit of geometry, but you don't have to do that. You can just print out a 5-inch star pattern from your computer. There are plenty of star patterns out there. So to start here, I'm going to grab right at about 19 inches, like I'd already discussed, and I'm going to give it a 90-degree bend. I'm going to take my flat nose pliers and just kind of make that nice and sharp there, that bend. And now I'm going to actually make that angle a little bit tighter to match my star. So here I'm going to use the flat nose pliers again to kind of bend that down. And then once I find that right angle, I'm going to grab at the point of my star once I get adjusted. And now I'm going to grab at the point of the star there. And with the flat head pliers, I'm going to grab at that point. And then I'm going to bend back up toward the inner part of my star. I've got a lot of wire on the end here, so I have to adjust and make sure I'm not hitting things with the end of that wire. Okay, and there I have that angle. So now I'm going to bend it back out at the next angle to match that and sharpen it with my flathead pliers. And I'm going to continue to match the pattern all the way around. It doesn't have to be exact. I just like it to look as close as possible. Obviously you don't want lopsided points on your star, so you want to get it as close as possible, but it doesn't need to be exact. This does take some time and some patience to get it lined up right and to get the angles correct, but you can do it. I was doing this for the first time with you guys, so I recorded this and I've never actually made this before, so this is kind of me doing it and you getting to watch me do it. So the reason I'm making this Christmas tree topper is because our church is having a volunteer Christmas party coming up soon, and I decided that for the ugly sweater contest I was going to wear a tree topper that was attached to a headband. I'm not going to tell you the whole thing because some of my friends who will be there may be watching this video. Anyhow, I'm going to do that, and then when I'm finished with it, this is going to become my girls' tree topper for their mini tree they have in their room, and they're very delighted to have that because the one they have right now is just a little cheap plastic one, so they're pretty excited about it. I'm going to go ahead and finish this part of the star, the outside frame of the star and let you guys just watch the rest of this little part, and then I will explain what I'm going to do next. So now that I've come to the end of the frame of the star, I'm going to take the center and bend it down so that I can connect the two bottom parts of the star together. So I'm going to mark right there in the center of the star with my Sharpie so that whenever I come around to loop that wire around the main part of the frame, it will be right there at that part. So I'm grabbing my round nose pliers and I'm making a little loop at the end of that wire with the wire going up toward the back. And then I'm just going to tighten that loop right onto that frame with my chain nose pliers. So there we go, we get it all tightened up on there. I'm just going to straighten up the wire a little bit here and make sure everything still looks good. Now I'm going to grab my bench block and my chasing hammer, and I'm going to hammer out this frame because I want it to be nice and hard and straight, so it's harder to bend as I'm wrapping wire around it. And then make sure it's all nice and straight. That's the front, this is the back. I'm going to recheck my frame and make sure it looks good. Then I'm going to cut the tail of that wire off, keeping that wire because we're going to use it. And I'm going to tighten down with my chain nose pliers the end of that loop and make sure it's nice and snug against the frame. There we go. And there you have it. It's all done. Kind of looks like a fairy wand. Next, we're going to grab that end of the wire and make a loop on the end. And then I'm going to loop that right on the first corner of the star and tighten my loop down. And then bring my wire up to the center. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. So we're going to take that wire back toward the center, but we're going to make a bend in the center. I'm going to use this little pot I have for random gemstones and use that to kind of lift that up because this is going to be a 3D star, and then bend that angle back toward the second point. So I'm using that to kind of lift up. Now this point, the middle point, is going to be further than the actual center because it's up in the air. And so I'm taking the end of that wire and I'm wrapping it around the frame again. Now when you're wrapping these wires around the frame, they may not be right at the very tip of that star, the points, and that's okay because you're going to end up wrapping all of this whole thing in some smaller gauge wire and you're not going to really notice any imperfections or it being exactly in the point of the star. So now you can see I brought the wire back up to match the wire that's in the front of the star. So you've got one in the front and one toward the back. And I'm going to cut off the end of that wire, leaving about 1 centimeter at the end. And I'm going to bend that back up and make a little loop there and pinch that wire down onto the frame. So now I have those two wires. Now grabbing that same wire I cut off, I'm making another loop at the end. And on the other side of that wire, I'm putting the end of that wire through those 2 wires and then attaching the loop to the 3rd point. So here I'm attaching it with the chain nose pliers, and you can see that wire is going through, and then I'm going to bring it back down, that wire, to the front of the star, the same side. So it's only wrapped around the front part of those 2 wires. And then it makes a little V shape. You want it nice and tight there, and you're going to wrap around this 3rd point to attach it. And then once that's fully wrapped around that point, you're going to bring the wire back up the back, and then you're going to bring this wire through the back part of that V that you made earlier and under. You can see me going through there. You kind of want to keep hold of that V so it doesn't change shape as you're pushing this other wire through. And then get it up as tight as you can, all the while holding that up from the main frame, because you want that 3D look. And then pull it down to that 4th point. And then again, you're going to wrap the end of that wire around that 4th point. Now notice this one is not centered on that point, and that's okay. And then I cut that wire off. And now with the last piece of the wire, I'm going to make another loop on the end. And I don't know why I did it this way rather than using the round nose pliers and making a little neat loop without having to cut the end off. I don't know, but there you have it. I'm going to pinch that down onto the frame again. And then this one, we're not going to do the little V around the center. We're just going to do one straight line going down, and then we're going to go under the original V that we made. And I'll show you that here in just a minute. So I'm going to straighten that wire out as best as I can. Then see how I'm going to take this wire and I'm going to go all the way back through the back of my star. It's going through that bottom triangle all the way through. There you go. I'm going to straighten that wire out again, and I'm going to bend this wire at a 90-degree angle and then find the distance, and this is going to help keep that shape, that 3D shape. So and then we're going to bend that back up in the back and then loop the end of the wire around the point, that top point of the star. And once we get our loop all nice and tight there, we'll snip the end off, just like we have for the other ends, the other points. I try to use my fingers as much as possible, but some of these areas are kind of tight or it's too hard to pull, so I will use and assist with my chain nose pliers to get those little loops all nice and tight up against my frame. And then I'll snip that end off like I had already said. And then there is the frame of my star. So now I'm going to get my metric ruler and measure about an inch from the top of that wire, or from the base of the star, and then bend this at a 90-degree angle. I'm going to use my flat nose pliers to give it a nice sharp bend there. So here's where we're going to start to make that spiral part for this star to be able to stand on the top of the tree. I'm going to use my ring mandrel, but you can use whatever type of mandrel you have at home. And I'm just going to wrap that around several times until my wire runs out. And then once I get to the end of the wire, I'm just going to pull the whole thing off the mandrel, and I'm going to adjust this spiral to how I want it to look. You can leave it like that, but I like to have the bottom part a little bit wider than the top than it was. So I'm kind of unraveling a little bit and stretching it out and arranging how I'd want that to look. So here you can see me kind of expanding those bottom rungs out a bit. And this doesn't have to be perfect. And now I'm going to take my round nose pliers and make a little loop at the very end of this so that it doesn't grab anything or pull on anything. And there you have the main shape of the star. So now I'm going to grab the 24 gauge wire. So I'm going to grab different lengths of this wire, probably about a yard at a time. And I'm going to take the end of this 24 gauge wire and wrap it around the base wire of this star. Doesn't matter where you start, you can start anywhere. You're going to wrap 3 to 5 times to kind of secure this wire onto the frame. I usually do 3 wraps, and that usually is sufficient for something like this. You're going to be wrapping so much wire around this that it's going to be wrapped in so many places, it's just not going to come off very easily. So there we've got it secured and started. And I had just started with this wire from the spool and then realized I probably need to cut it off from the spool because I'm not going to be able to wrap around. So here you'll see me cut that length of wire. Like I said earlier, this is the first time I've done this, so I had to figure things out as I went. So I'm taking this first length of wire and I'm going to wrap it around the center part of this star to kind of get a straight line from the base part of that star up to the center of the star. You can wrap this whatever way you want. This is where creativity comes in. This is the way I did it, but you can wrap it whatever way you'd like to. It's kind of up to the creator. That's the cool thing about doing any of this wire work. You can make it look like whatever you want. So here I'm just getting it all secure up there. And I'm going to wrap around this wire a couple of times just to get it secured. And then I'm just going to start zigzagging around this middle wire that I just attached from the base of the star to the center of the star, and then back to one of the frame lines from the point to the center. And I'm going to go back and forth. This first part I start off with doing one side, then go back to the other side. But then I end up just doing one little section at a time. You'll see that here in just a second and understand what I'm talking about when you see it. So here I'm going back around that frame. And then I'm trying to decide which way I'm going to go. I go around here, which is that center one that I've just put on there with the thinner wire. And then this is where I'm trying to decide. I go up this way, but I don't want it to look like a leaf pattern. I want it to zigzag, so this is where I decide to go back. And then I'm just going to keep weaving this section zigzag back and forth. So I'm going to just let you guys watch that for a minute or two here. And then I'll come back and explain what my next step is. Okay, so here's where I was talking about we'll be able to secure some of these ends to the frame earlier on and kind of adjust things. So I'm going to take this wire and kind of put it through this area where these ends meet at the point there. And I'm going to wrap around this area, and I'm going to go back around and back through again and just secure the ends of the base frame to the point of that base frame to that end there, so they're not slipping all around. And then I'm going to resume back to the weaving around the frame with this weaving wire. So now that y'all can see the basic weave that I'm doing here on this, I'm not going to bore you so that you watch the entire thing. So I'm just going to show you the next step from here. Here's the finished product after I've got it all woven. It looks pretty cool like this. You can leave it this way if you want to for a tree topper. You don't have to add the lights. Adding the lights does add quite a bit more wire to it. So it just depends on what the look you're going for is. So here's my fairy lights that I got. These are copper wire fairy lights. They're a battery operated pack. I'm not sure if you can get it in a plug-in version or not. But this is what I had laying around, so this is what I'm using. So here I'm just checking to make sure the wires still work even though it's on a copper base. And I'm going to just start wrapping this wire around randomly around the entire thing. So here I'm going and wrapping all different directions. Again, you can be creative, you could do whatever you'd like. These fairy lights come in different lengths. So you could get shorter lengths so you don't have so much wire wrapped around. You can get longer lengths to have even more lights. This particular strand of lights had 50 lights on it, which I think worked out perfect for this particular star, although there was quite a bit of wire. So then I take the end of this and just kind of spiral it through that spiral so that it sits on the inside of the spiral for that battery pack. And then here I'm going to turn it on and test it out after I make little minor adjustments here of this stand to make sure it's centered and that wire wrapped around. And here I'm going to turn it on, and there you can see a cute little star. And this has different options on this particular light string. So there you can see the flashing lights, or the moving lights, or there's one that just kind of goes different directions, the fading in and out. It's kind of fun. You could play with different types of lights. You could have colored lights, you could do white lights, but I chose to do the white ones, and I honestly just like the solid feature myself. But there it is, it's finished. I sure hope you guys enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed creating it. We'll see you the next time. Bye.